My name is Debbie Reynolds, and we have Pamela Gupta here, and this is our monthly installment of the Data Privacy and Cybersecurity Fix, where we talk about issues that intersect with privacy and cybersecurity. I'm thrilled to have my friend and expert in cybersecurity, Pamela Gupta, here. Hey, Pamela.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. So, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I wanted to talk, I think it'll be good for us to talk about together about Facebook and the Apple fight right now about apps and tracking.
Right. Perfect. Well, let me just talk about it at a high level. What is happening? We can kind of get into the details. So, last year, Apple announced that they were going to make some changes in how third-party apps, use data of individuals. So, Apple, as you know, has a huge first-party data exchange with their direct customers, but third party apps and advertisers in the past had a lot more detailed information about individuals. And so has been and has successfully really pulled back and changed the way that they're handling this kind of third party data collection. So I think it's called App Transparency, ATT, which is the major point is to give less granular data to advertisers and marketers about individuals unless they get the direct consent of the individual. So this has been rolling out since October, I think September, October of 2020, and as of this month, which is what is this, May? They recently rolled out 14.5, iOS 14.5, which is one of the bigger updates they had related to privacy. So I read an article just overall recently that less than 4% of people who updated to iOS 14.5 opted in for advertisers to track them. So that's kind of an interesting statistic. But the fight that you're talking about is really Apple changing their business model, and that's forcing people who want data of Apple users to change their business model. So Apple's taking this proactive step, but all companies, including Facebook, have to react to this change, and it's going to change, especially companies that monetize the sale or monetize marketing to individuals. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is a important kind of a consideration for privacy, especially for privacy and also for security, because it does affect Facebook and other companies as well in terms of their marketing, but primarily Facebook. So let's just step back for a minute. In a couple of years ago, and on an ongoing basis, we do hear about Facebook and other companies, but like I said, primarily Facebook likes to track the ways people are using their phone. And we are sharing a lot of very intimate details with our phones. So if we take a look at how we're interacting with the phones, whether it's an app on for how much water you're drinking in a day or how much exercise you're doing. There are multiple apps that we have on the phone, and we are sharing a lot of very intimate details. The privacy issue and security issue comes to a head when we don't even realize how much these apps are tracking these details. And not only can it be very sensitive data, it can be often, it could be even embarrassing data, but they are not only tracking it internally, they are sharing it with companies such as Facebook and other companies. That is one thing. The other is this could be very sensitive data, such as location data, for example, or I won't go into any more details. But the fact is, we are storing a lot of and sharing a lot of very sensitive data, very could be embarrassing data also, and we don't know how it is being secured on the other side where the apps are storing and sharing, and with who all are they sharing. So that is the problem in a crux, right, as to why we care about this. Now, of course, if we talk about how does it affect Apple and how does it affect Facebook, it affects their business models significantly. And that also will have a ripple effect on us, right? Because for Apple, whether they do have the ability to do this kind of a micro marketing effort, it doesn't affect them because they are providing the hardware. Whereas for Facebook, it does affect how much revenue they make because they're not getting this information. So, in how does it affect us indirectly? Because if Facebook loses out on revenue from this, for example, then they will have to look at other ways of generating that income, right? So what is currently everything is free right now on the platform would maybe they'll have to go to a subscription model or something. So the point I'm driving is that on the one hand, we have this troves of data, and Apple is doing the right thing by saying that we should have consent. If we want to share this data, then we share it. If apps are going to be tracking data, they should tell the customer or to the user that this is being done. So that is absolutely the right thing. But all I want to mention is that there will be a repercussion on the free information or free use of platforms, etc., that can also be impacted by these kind of moves.
Yeah. It's a tectonic shift in marketing, and I think it's going to change a lot of the way that people interact with companies and how they try to interact with consumers. Because what Apple is really doing is shifting their risk for third-party data sharing. So as we see these regulations coming out about privacy, most of these regulations have some mention of how third party data tracking happens and the responsibility of first party data gatherers. So if Apple has a lot of first party data where they have direct relationship with a consumer that agreed to share their stuff, they're saying now we don't want to take on the risk of having sharing this data with a third party, not knowing what they're going to do with the information, right? So this is almost like, you think back Facebook with Cambridge Analytica, that is the big
Right.
issue where, you know, there was data shared somehow from Facebook to Cambridge Analytica, and then they did all these crazy things with it. So Apple is saying, let the third party ask for this data from an individual, and then that will be their responsibility then, and that's their relationship. So they're not piggybacking off of the relationship that Apple has with the consumer. One of the other big things there are huge changes that are going to happen as a result of this. So one is just the power of a operating system. So Apple, because so many people have Apple phones, the change that they're making impacts anyone anywhere in the world that uses their OS, which that's not something that you can do with regulation because we don't have global regulations currently about privacy. They're all jurisdictional, right? And they're
Right.
different, and it takes a long time to pass it. So I think just making that change shows the power of technology and technology companies. So, this is a situation where this benefits it benefits Apple obviously in a number of ways. It benefits them because it shows the power, market power that they have.
Oh,
Also,
yes.
it's going to benefit them because they're going to make more money because people who love their privacy are probably going to gravitate more towards Apple products. So they're going to benefit doubly from that. And then the people who don't benefit will be the ones who aren't transparent. And I think that's just the future. So companies that aren't willing to be transparent with people aren't going to get that first party data from people, or that first party, all the details that they have been accustomed to having. So to me, that it kind of goes right into what you're saying about monetization of some sort, whether that be these companies trying to offer financial incentives for you to share, or to make you pay for a service that they're providing. But they really don't want you to pay, because the once you pay, it helps you try to um, once you pay for a service, it different laws and regulations kick in, and then you have to try to balance what you think is um, fair. So let's say Facebook. So Facebook is free now. Let's say Facebook said, okay, you don't want to share this data with me. You can use Facebook if it costs, $1,500 a year, and you probably say no, right? Because for you, you don't think it's worth that. But as long as there's a free service, they can make that or more from your data. So I think it's going to be a huge change, a shift in how companies get creative about finding ways to get people to either pay for services or to incentivize them to share.
Yeah, I think this is a great move, and it is actually actually almost surprising that it has kind of flown under the radar for so long, that these apps were actually collecting a lot of this information and sharing it with third parties, including Facebook.
Right.
Not a normal what you would expect. It's almost like a spying behavior, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm surprised that there is any backlash to this move, because I would think this is the given, right? This is how they should be operating, where if they're going to share anything with anyone else, and in some cases, for example, I don't know if you read this a couple of years ago, Wall Street had done that article I was talking about, where people did not even have to be Facebook users in order for Facebook to be getting the information.
oh yeah.
Apps that were getting sharing information without even you, so you would not even think about it. Is my point, right? That so Facebook could get your information, for example, because you're not even a Facebook user. So
Right.
this is a very welcome change, and
Yeah.
actually goes to the one of the basic principles of security, that if you don't need it, then don't store it or don't collect data that you don't need. In this
Yeah.
case, this was storing data and sharing it on steroids, right? Because you're not only just doing it for your own app, but you're sharing it with third parties. So I'm really very much in favor of what they've done. And like I said, this should not even have been a decision that a particular vendor had to make. This should have been the way things should have been.
Yeah, it's totally gone way out of control. Not just Facebook, but other companies as well.
Right.
Someone had told me recently that there was a situation where certain people, if a search engine or something knew that you were an alcoholic, they would sell your data to alcohol companies so they could pitch you alcohol, which is totally wrong, right? You would think,
Right.
they're thinking,
I
oh,
have the opposite.
we don't care that you have this issue. We want to
Right.
sell more alcohol. So that's kind of the ethical, dilemma that we get into. But also you press on a point that is very interesting, and it applies mostly to the US. So which is, if you're not a customer of Facebook and they have your data, you don't really have any rights in that regard,
Right.
because a lot of the rights and regulations in the US about data handling has to do with you being a customer. So if your grandma is not a customer, you take a picture with her on Facebook, you're a customer, so you can do stuff with your data. But she, as a non customer, doesn't have the same agency or the same rights. So, as you say, a lot of these apps, they try to they make and they're pretty accurate, so they make associations between you and other people, and they make assumptions about you. People, like for people who aren't on Facebook, if you know someone who's on Facebook, like Facebook knows a lot about you, and you don't have a lot of rights to do anything about what they know. They will want you to become a customer in order to do that, and that's not. That is just kind of a gray area in the U.S. with privacy regulations, because a lot of the regulations are not about human rights; they're about consumer rights. So not every human is a consumer. That's like a huge area, gray area.
Right, and this is different from, Samsung, for example, a couple of years ago. They had a issue where they had smart TVs and they were saying that don't discuss anything confidential in front of the TV. This is different from that because in that case, they were sending the voice recordings to a third party for analysis. So there's this difference here because here it was still related to their business process and they had a clear kind of a container around who they were sharing data with, right? So then they were able to come back and say, well, don't talk about anything confidential in front of your TVs because it's going to a third party for analysis. Okay, and if they have to put a stop to it, then they know what to do, anonymize the data or stop the sharing of the data. But
Hmm.
in this case, we're talking about, for marketing purposes, sharing data with third parties who are not even a part of their ecosystem for business processing. So this is a different kind of a problem which requires a simpler solution, I would say, because this is not even related to their business processing. So
No,
it's
right.
right,
Yeah, right, exactly. So you don't know right now the way the like data brokers work. A lot of times they're getting this information, they're putting them into risk models, and then they're selling them back to other companies. So you don't have any idea of what these data brokers are collecting. First of all, you don't know who they are. Then you don't know what they're collecting, and then you don't know what inferences that they're making that could possibly be very dangerous and incorrect about
right.
someone. So if I'm searching for alcoholism, they could infer that I'm an alcoholic, which I'm not. So, those things are dangerous. And I think the way that the regulations are going now and the way that businesses, I'm glad that Apple made this change because it is going to help people understand that you can make money and protect people's privacy as
Right.
opposed to damaging someone's privacy for money. So the incentive now is different than it was before. And I hope that, and I know that, the future is about transparency with the individual. So, I like to say it's like a bank. So if you put your money in a bank, and you ask for your balance, you would be upset if they said, well, we can't tell you what your balance is to your bank. You'd be like, live it. So I think from a data perspective, businesses need to get as transparent as banks are about money because data is valuable. So being transparent and helping people know who they can trust with their information and that it's not being used for other purposes beyond what they said, I think it's the way of the future.
I agree. I agree that we want to go towards minimization, not expansion of the threat surface, and now along with not only do we have data that is being collected internally and being stored internally and being shared with external parties, it's also using technology such as when you have so much data, then you bring in tools such as for analytics or AI. And even if, and I know we're going to be talking about AI in our next session, but the problem with AI is even if you scrub the data and you take out what is sensitive data, it can still put two and two together and come to conclusions about the fact that you're alcoholic, for somebody's an alcoholic, for example. it may not have a label there that says alcoholic, but it can surmise from the data that is being stored in the system. For example, if it's buying habits or the frequency or whatever, based on those patterns, can detect. So the right direction is to minimize the data and not think that you can go back and scrub it or anonymize it for safety sharing
Yeah.
safely.
I agree with that. I think less data is best, and I feel like data collected. One of the problems with too much data collection is that really bad and harmful inferences can be made
Right.
with the more data that you have, and then when data is collected, it doesn't really have context. So you're sort of assuming that the AI is trying to make a assumption or making a connection that may not be true or accurate. And so if we don't have enough visibility into AI, we don't know what that is. But I think, like you said, let's put less data into the system and make sure that the data that we put in is necessary for the processes that it's being used for.
And I agree.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, this is great. I love this conversation. So yeah, well we'll definitely wrap up. I'm sure a lot of people will be talking about this for quite a while. I think probably the next, 12 to 24 months is going to be very different in terms of how businesses change their processes in a way in terms of creating more transparency and also trying to reduce their third party data sharing risk.
Right.
Excellent. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you, Debbie.